Hello and welcome to Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. That's a quote from Albert Einstein, and it's also in the opening chapter of a new guide simply called The Self-Help Book, 6 Practical Ways to Never Stop Growing. Here with us now is author Jared Graybeal, a certified personal trainer, nutrition specialist, and public speaker. Thank you so much for joining us, Jared. I want to talk about these 6 practical ways, but before we get into that, you have a very interesting background. Tell us where it led you to write this book and how you grew up and some of the things that happened in your life.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on the show.
Sure.
It's a pleasure to be here. My background, well, a couple things. My background is complicated, and sort of how I got to writing this book is certainly a long story, so I'll try to wrap it up into a really tightly knit 1-minute version. Grew up in Central Florida, a little city called Lakeland, Florida, near Orlando and Tampa. On the low end of the income spectrum, by all means, and so grew up in a pretty diverse neighborhood. I was in and out of trouble my whole childhood into middle school, high school, and pretty gifted kid, though, so I always did really, really well education-wise. Just after school, I was kind of always in trouble, and ended up going to jail after my senior year of high school, literally right after. And that was for possession of marijuana, intent to distribute. I started smoking and selling weed around 11 years old. And so that sort of became my that was my income. Growing up, we didn't have an allowance, and we didn't really have much of anything. So I sort of had the ambition to get it for myself, and that was how I chose to do that. And of course, these days it's not so frowned upon, depending on what part of the country you're in.
Right.
But back then it was illegal and it was frowned upon. And so I ended up spending a couple months in jail the summer after my senior year. I didn't get to go to the college that I wanted to go to, given those circumstances. And so after about 2.5 months in jail, I got out and I spent 2 years on house arrest, which I would attribute a lot of my personal development and growth to those 2 years. And now, granted, that was over 10 years ago, so I've certainly been growing a lot since then. But 2 years on house arrest, I was just in school full time. I was studying to be a trainer. I was working full time, and basically the only other time I had was at the grocery store 1 hour a week.
You ended up getting a college degree?
Yeah, so I did stay in school the whole time, and then eventually became a manager at a nationwide health club chain, and kind of grew in the rankings there until I decided to leave. And long story short, start my own business in 2015. I've been running and growing that business since. And along the way, picked up the art of writing. But no, I mean, the book is really inspired by a quote that I read when I was a kid by Benjamin Franklin. And it's sort of like a paraphrase. But Benjamin Franklin basically said, if you want to be someone that people remember, either write things worth reading or do things worth writing about. And as a kid, I've always known, whether it's vanity or some God-given ego, I want to be remembered. I think we all kind of want to be someone of worth long-term. And so I always knew as a kid I wanted to write a book. Was it this book? No, I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But earlier last year, I wrote a blog called 6 Ways to Never Stop Growing, and the blog was really, really long. It was too long to be a blog. And I had left a lot out because I was trying to write it in a blog format for my blog site. So I decided, I need to revisit this blog, invest a lot more time into it, and extrapolate on all my ideas, and then publish a book. And so I did it, and here we are.
Good for you. I love that story. That is a great story. Talk about learning from your mistakes, changing, growing. You lived basically what you write about in this book, which is tremendous. And you actually run 2 businesses. Just briefly, what are those?
Yeah, so Superfit Foods is a nationwide, fully customizable, subscription-based healthy meal prep company. And then E3 Business Solutions is a digital marketing and consulting agency.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about your book and go through these 6 practical ways one by one and just give us an overview of what each one is, starting with confidence.
Yeah, so confidence, of course, is an area I believe that we can all grow in regularly. And I think one of the important things is to clearly define confidence, not as ego or pride, and certainly not as like false humility, but just a confidence in one's own abilities. Because when you're more confident, you're more productive. You're easier to be around. You're easier to work with. You're easier to work for. And you're easier to lead, right? So confidence, I believe, is a big character trait that we all need to grow in. Now, unfortunately, some of us don't know that we need to grow in our confidence because of maybe insecurities that we've learned to cloak over time. And some of us don't know how to grow in confidence, right? So the chapter goes into one, how do you even know if you need to grow in confidence? And it asks some sort of questions that will prompt you to introspect and to think, like, is it an area that I need to grow in? And then if so, of course, it has a ton of practical information, even literally from developing a morning routine to how to carry yourself in public. So the confidence chapter is huge. And then, of course, it goes into competence, right? So, a lot of us, we're fully confident, but maybe we don't know enough to grow in our career or to grow in our ability to do well at something that we're passionate about, right? So competence is huge, but a lot of people don't realize that in this era, information is literally everywhere. Some of us spend too much time on social media and not enough time seeking out information that would help us grow.
Right. Consider the source as well. We have to always put that in there. Consider the source.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this goes into a lot of practical ways to never stop growing in the area of your competence, places to find sourceful information, right, reputable information, and how to obtain it, long-term memory, short-term memory. It goes into the science of some of that stuff. And then, of course, we have connections where, we've been led to believe, obviously, there's extroverts and introverts, and I think that that's a real thing. But this misconception that introverts aren't good at connecting, or maybe just because you're not a public speaker doesn't mean you shouldn't be good at meeting new people.
Yeah.
And in order to consistently grow in your life, whether it be in your career, relationships, you need to learn how to constantly create connections.
And that's been tough. You wrote this book before COVID happened, and that has been a tough thing for people these days. And especially people, well, I'm a big extrovert. I like to go out. I love to be around people, very social. And I've really felt it, especially now. It's almost been a year. And I'm almost like, okay, is this ever going to end? Because I think we are social and we want to get out with each other. We want to see people. We want to do things. So that's a tough, right? Connection right now is tough, but there are ways to do it. We've been trying to do it virtually as much as possible.
Yeah, and of course, there's nothing like in-person connections and communication, but you've got to learn to leverage the opportunities that God has given us, and in this season, it's mainly work. And then, of course, the next one is clarity, right? And so this is one thing that I think people struggle with a lot, is gaining clarity in their life, because we live in such a time of busy, go, go, go. However, 2020 would have it that we probably get a lot more time to ourselves. Maybe not everybody. A lot of people got family at home, and so now that you're stuck at home, it might be a little bit more difficult. But the portion talks a lot about things like fasting, and I don't mean just food fasting, but social media fasting, internet fasting, being able to separate yourself from the noise of the world to finally hear from yourself and your own conscience and try to learn how to reflect is a powerful tool for self-growth.
Yes, and there's a lot of noise right now, so that's a very good point.
Constantly a lot of noise, and it's never going to go away.
No.
We got to learn how to compartmentalize the noise. And then, of course, character, and this is a touchy subject for everybody, right? In a perfect world, we would all be able to say, I don't need to work on my character, but that's just not the case. And I can speak from personal experience. Every time I read this chapter, which is a couple times, of course, because of these interviews and all the, the edits I had to do, I'm conflicted all the time, because we can always grow in our character. We can always be better friends to somebody. We can always work on being a better spouse, a better coworker, a better person, a better contributing member of society, right? And so the character portion can be touchy, but for the open-minded readers that choose to pick up this book, it's going to be a game changer. And then, of course, we have commitment, right? Because at the end of the day, if you pick this book up and you read the whole thing, but you don't commit to making the changes, it's all for nothing. I don't think commitment is necessarily something people choose to be bad at. It's just something that a lot of people are bad at.
Yeah.
And so visiting how we can grow in our commitment level can be very impactful, and that's why I saved it for the last chapter.
Well, you have really covered a lot of ground with this book. I know it's you read it easily. It's not something really a long type of book, so it's something that you can turn to each chapter if you need the help in that area. And what has the feedback been so far about it?
It's been really good, and I've had some people that I know read great books, and so that's been really refreshing for me because, again, growing up and even this past year, I would never consider myself to be this professional writer, author. It's just something that I felt obligated to put out into the world, and I've only gotten great feedback, and so that's really affirming.
That is great to hear. And where can people get this book?
You can find it at selfhelpbook.co or online anywhere that books are sold.
And what is your website?
My website is jaredgraybeal.com.
Well, Jared, I know you're a young man and you're just really branching out into so many different areas, and I wish you well with everything. I wish you well with the book.
I really appreciate the opportunity.
Again, it is called The Self-Help Book, 6 Practical Ways to Never Stop Growing. I think we can all use that right now, and I will put a link to all these sites in the show notes. Thank you all for joining me today. Please be sure to subscribe to get updates on my newest episode, and visit me at livingwellwithrobinstoloff.com and get some great healthy living tips on my Facebook page, Twitter, or Instagram. So glad you were with me today for Living Well with Robin Stoloff, empowering you to live a healthier life. Until next time, please stay safe and keep living well.